You were sitting with the other day guards in the security office of the daycare, while the toddlers were taking a nap and Moon was diligently keeping them asleep. Quietly, everyone was staring at the small security monitor. Occasionally, the moon-faced daycare attendant leered at them, but he was keeping quiet. At the old pizzaplex, Moon had been kept in a permanent state of being offline. Or, well, he had been retired. This was due to him being quite frightening to the toddlers. However, by simply raising the minimum age of the daycare to be more akin to a kindergarten, and adding an additional human employee in the form of a nanny, really helped ease the waves. And since the new pizzaplex sold itself as being better, this was a business expense the owner of the new plex and Fazbear Entertainment had to swallow. But why was everyone here not scattered around, helping the people currently being customers? Well, Brian, leader of the day guards, who was ordered to work here after the old one was destroyed, had set himself up with a microphone and a tiny spy camera, as he was attending a meeting with the bigwigs. The daycare, meanwhile, was the closest attraction to the meeting room, so here was the best connection. But what was this all about? It was about the upcoming autumn special events. One of many promotional events Fazbear had, but the events happening in autumn, and specifically the Christmas event, well, they were always the best and got the most revenue. So everyone was super curious as to what they would be. Wait, where are Johnny, Dimitri, and Bob? Whispered one guard. They're hyper-focusing on their job right now to allow us this little spy session, you whispered in response. The guard raised his brow. Oh, really? Why would they skip on this? Dimitri is too stuck up and disciplined to skip. Johnny doesn't care, and Bob, well... You looked at a female guard named Stephanie, with a look that said more than 1,000 words. And the man you spoke to chuckled, making Moon glare at him in response. He waved as an apology. I can barely hear anything, whispered someone else, and without asking he increased the volume. Moon's head instantly shot towards the guards, his eyes turning dangerously red. Sorry. The meeting was going smoothly. Until... We need something new, said one of the higher-ups. We're already repeating 2 events. And sure, the Halloween event is a classic, I completely understand that, but do we really have to do the pumpkin patch event again? It's basically a lighter version of the basic Halloween one. That was the sort of vibe currently ghosting around the group. You sighed after every sentence they spoke. Hey, why do you keep sighing? You rolled your eyes. I suggested a brilliant event and no one fucking cares. I told Brian, but he hasn't brought it up yet. And just then, as you were interrupted by Brian's voice. What about, let's call it, the Endless Summer Event? You know, just so we can keep some stuff going that we already had. You sighed again, but this time out of relief. You had suggested the Endless Summer Event weeks ago to the pothead, and he seemed interested, but one day he snapped and just said, if you keep annoying me with this, I'm not going to suggest it during the meeting. So it seemed as if you didn't annoy him too much after all. You need to make note as to how far you could go with him. Explain, employee. You could practically hear Brian smirk in response to that insult. Oh, Ron, you know I'm more than just an employee. In fact, weren't you the one who drank himself almost into a coma on my birthday 2 months ago? The executive blushed hard and blew up his cheeks. Anyways, I know exactly how this event will go down, and since I'm the only one here who has this actually in the middle of the daily activities here at the Pizzaplex, I also know exactly what we need. and what will sell. So, listen to me, please, gentlemen. The reason Brian could talk like this to, well, anyone at Fazbear Entertainment was the simple fact that he was the second son of the current owner of Afton Robotics. After the disappearance of William Afton and his entire family, Brian's dad had taken over, leading to a new era of prosperity, but also more a corporate mindset for Afton Robotics. Probably half of attack drones currently used by the US military had the Afton Robotics branding. Brian presented the event exactly how you explained it, maybe even a little better. You were surprised. How was this guy so good at this? It was based on your childhood and how you had spent the last week of summer holidays at an authentic cowboy ranch experience and farm. Well, in reality, the thing was just a small holiday resort with a bunch of horse stables and cowboy-themed decorations, but hearing the suggestion of putting the animatronics in farming attire and selling an authentic cowboy barbecue experience to the customers, it just seemed simple, easy, and quite lucrative, especially for the more conservative customers. A few days had passed and you were in a quite good mood. Your suggestion was sold brilliantly by Brian, especially because, even though you didn't know it, two of the higher-ups grew up on farms, so their votes were instantly on the bucket. The others agreed due to how cheap this event would be for Fazbear. It was just removing a few spices out of the chili con carne from El Chip, adding a little bit more tomato sauce to create the totally new and never before sold Fazbear Cowboy Stew. Then designing 3 different barbecue burgers, that once again were just regular burgers with barbecue sauce and an extra beef patty, and putting cheap steak on the menu as well. Decorations were hung up and the animatronics placed on trucks to be transported to an actual ranch to take promotional photos with them for the event. And that's when things became entertaining for you. Because Brian put you on guard duty for that. After all, it was your idea, and now your responsibility to make it as go smoothly as possible. That was mean, but gritting your teeth, you accepted it. You drove behind the Fazbear truck on its journey to the farm. The city vista slowly gave way to the romantic countryside. Or, well, romantic to you and other city folk. You stopped next to the truck an hour later, and as you stepped outside, you just had to, wow. You found yourself on an abandoned little farm. The silo looked old and a little rusty. The barn's doors were just gone, and the house on the property looked a little faded too. You stepped next to the truck driver as the rest of the convoy arrived. 2 photographers, 3 Fazbear mechanics, and on-duty engineer Kevin, who looked very excited to be here. "Isn't this a little spooky for a promotion?" you asked the truck driver, who just shrugged as he proceeded to unload the animatronics. But after repeating your concern to Kevin, he too just shrugged. "It's just the outside. A few employees came here 2 days ago and cleaned the place up. Inside, it looks good enough for photo shooting. Anything else we fix with Photoshop." And so the day began. As the guard, you were really only here to ensure safety and no one was stealing stuff, which was unbelievably boring. You weren't even allowed to take a leak, or to doze off despite the drabness of it all. The photographers were paid handsomely, and they really worked for that money, though they did seem to have a slight obsession with Roxanne, who had been put in a beautiful white thin wavy summer dress and a white summer straw hat. She looked absolutely stunning. Freddy and Monty were both wearing overalls, with the words enthusiasm printed on their chests. The pun was amazing, just like their performances. Monty riding a tractor was a sight to behold, and Freddy with a wooden pipe in his mouth, carrying a scythe on his back, well, it was oddly intimidating. Wait. You suddenly jolted up, and while the photographers kept making pictures, the engineers looked at you. Where's Son? The daycare attendant had been here. You saw him be taken off the truck in cowboy pants and wearing a cowboy hat, but he vanished some time after his first photo shoot, next to some bottles. And now he was gone. You had just assumed he was being photographed somewhere else, maybe the wild cornfield glowing around the farm, but eventually you just realized, wait, both photographers were right there taking pictures of the glam rocks. And that's when a wonderful day turned into an absolute nightmare. Let's not worry about the glam rocks, said Kevin hastily, as he pushed you and the mechanics into the building. The daycare attendant is a twitchy machine. He could be anywhere, but he cannot leave the perimeter of the property. That's the only good thing about it. Everyone looked at each other in confusion, and Kevin deadpanned. I tried to explain this to you too. He meant the mechanics. Because Son is programmed to always be within viewing distance of the truck. The group owed, you included. Right now the Glamrocks and Son see the truck as a sort of substitute pizzaplex, until they return to the real thing. So you can't be too far. Kevin looked around the small kitchen of the farm building, the four of you were in. Then he pointed at you. Dagard, you check the building. Make sure to look thoroughly through the basement and the attic. While he is programmed to avoid shadows, he could unintentionally maybe fall down the stairs and turn into Moon. You nodded. Understood. The rest of you follow me outside. We check the field and the barn. There was no better plan, no better idea anyone had. So your group split up. You looked through the kitchen's window at the Glamrocks, as a new scene was set up for them to pose. This would still take a while, so you felt confident in this little endeavor, and that this faux pas wouldn't mean that you'd lose your job. You would even think this was a fun game of hide and seek, if it wasn't so tense. First, you checked the basement. It was dark, dusty, and moist here. Obviously, the crew didn't clean here. Not expecting to take photos down in the deep dark. Instead of exploring, you just sat down at the bottom of the steps and listened carefully. Moon would definitely think this was his daycare if he awoke here. So, most definitely he tried to clean up. It was the unmistakable noise of a glass jar falling and shattering on the ground that made you jump. Mechanical curses came from the darkness. Damn it, he was down here. You sighed before slowly walking into the darkness, closer to the noise. First you saw his red glow come into view. He seemed to be in a sort of storage room. Pickled vegetables lined the neatly sorted shelves. Too bad you hated pickled food. Too sour or too salty. You just didn't like it, okay? Between the various shelves you peeked at Moon, who was holding a rusty broom in his thin animatronic hand. The daycare attendant was technology-wise so foreign to the future compared to the old crab in the farmhouse that this might as well be a scene from an alien movie. The robot spit more curses and complaints as he swiped the pickled vomit of whatever he had knocked to the ground. Moon? You asked. And the robot shrieked in surprise. Standing still, he stepped forward for a moment.
Yes, I'm Moon,
he said eventually before turning to face you. His facial plate spinning wildly as he analyzed your face.
Yes, I recognize you. You're in my data bank. Dayguard, mostly stationed at Roxy Raceway. Am I correct?
he muttered, and in return you nodded.
I'm not going to ask you what you're doing here in my daycare at night. Just help me get this place cleaned up. Cleaned up. Cleaned up.
He was furious. But honestly, you'd probably be furious too if you woke in some random stranger's abandoned, dirty, moist basement with your programming telling you that this was in fact your real home, and now you were supposed to turn it into a place safe for children to play and nap in. Honestly, Moon felt like the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders. Against his own will, of course. You opened your mouth and raised a finger, but then decided to think a little bit more of what exactly to tell the machine. You sighed and leaned against one of the shelves, calming your nerves, crossing your arms. You finally said, "Moon, how did you even get here?" The robot's face turned upside down.
What do you mean, how did I get here? This is my daycare, and I seldom leave it.
You took a step closer to him, patiently setting your hands on his shoulders. "Moon, listen to me carefully." He shivered. He hated being touched. And you spoke so slowly. "This is not, in fact, your daycare. This is a farmhouse outside of town. You're here for a photo op. More specifically, Sun is here for a photo op." The machine grabbed your wrists so tight it actually hurt a lot.
So, you are telling me I have been doing cleanup for nothing? Absolutely nothing? And that there is a world outside the Pizzaplex filled with little brats who don't nap? A whole world that's dirty and chaotic and...
He made a dangerously sounding crackling noise, and a singular sun spike shot out of his right cheek. He manually pressed it back into his head.
I...
He turned to face one of the shelves. Taking a jar, he held it in his hands. He made a sound of exhaling.
Dagard, I'm scared.
Moon said. "Aww." You gently patted him on the back.
So, farmhouse outside of town. Abandoned, right? By how it looks.
He whispered. Yes.
You see, there's this thing in my programming I'm not allowed to do. Do you think it's okay to do them here?
You chuckled. Go ahead. You made a gulping sound before throwing the glass jar on the ground, splashing yellow liquid and mushy egg puree everywhere. Thankfully, you were out of the blast zone.
I feel naughty.
He spoke in a deadpan way.
It feels liberating. I feel alive. I don't like it.
You shrugged. Well, can't all be winners. Here, let me clean you. Taking out a handkerchief, you swiped away the egg and slime that covered the robot. It smelled neutral, so it wasn't that bad. "Well, that's as clean as I can make you right now," you said eventually. "Is there anything else you want to..." You stopped talking because something hard was squeezing you in a very particular place. You looked down, staring at his groping hand. "Moon? What are you doing?"
I am programmed to avoid this place from customers, children, and employees. I was curious as to how it feels.
Your hands turned to fists for just a moment, but then he squeezed you just right, and you moaned.
Ooh, interesting reaction this day, Guard. Though I understand this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, I'm glad I get to share it with you.
Moon snickered. He came closer as he pressed you against the wall. You gasped.
So, I'd like to seize the opportunity.
His hands tore open the buttons on your shirt. Okay. This was crazy. You fought breathlessly. Please, not so rough. Moon narrowed his eyes.
Very well then, Miss Nightguard. I take that as your consent.
His touches became gentler, soft, yet also more curious, digging for crevices, trying to touch as much of your soft skin as possible. He was very helpless in his approach. I'm gonna do something that I definitely shouldn't. His eyes met yours.
What is in the basement stays in the basement,
he hushed. Okay, good. Then you took hold of your belt. Let's make this more exciting. Thank you to the people who are supporting me on Ko-fi. You guys are keeping me alive.